Hey everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore. Welcome to the Music Masterclass. And before I go any further, I want to apologize. I'm always apologizing for technical things because technology is what it is. Yesterday, the cafe did happen. It just was not set up properly in the link. Somehow the playlist got off, and anyhow, you had to go directly to my channel to find it. And so it wasn't there within the regular place in the community for some reason. So sorry about that. So I did update the links there so that if the same thing ever goes wrong again, there will be a direct link that should take you to my channel where you can see whatever's going on live. So in any case, if you go there now, you should be able to see the recording from yesterday. But today, hopefully a new story for the Music Masterclass, and I've got several things kind of lined up to talk about here, and doing my little sound check. Sound quality's terrible. What? Holy crap! All right, so what's going on? I need to discover what might be. I can't actually imagine why that would be. So, gosh, it's always something, right? So my voice is fine, but the music is off. Okay, well then let me. Huh. I really am not doing anything different than I usually am. So let me listen for a moment here, uh, just to see what I hear. All right, give me a moment. I got to wait for it to catch up. Just to see what I hear. All right, give me a moment. I got to wait for it to catch up. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is just my microphone picking up me sliding the computer around. So I'll try not to do that. But if it keeps happening, keep me posted. Yeah, so I guess I don't. Yeah. We'll see. Let me do one more little test here before I move on. So let me do one more test. It's already moved on to the next video here. All right. You all tell me if that last one sounded any better. Sounded good just then. All right. Then I'm just gonna assume whatever was going on, and things will be okay. But yeah, it's still a learning process. It's always a learning process for me. It could be. Let me turn off this option here and see if that is going to make a difference. I don't know if it will or not, but I guess we'll find out. Okay, so all right, let's get on with the actual show here. So there's a couple of things I said I wanted to focus on, but I want to start by picking up on a comment that I made in a score that was posted. There was an arrangement of a piece by John Rutter, and we gave some comments on the arrangement. A lot of nice discussion there on Heist Vicker's piece. And then we talked about it some in the office hours I did with the All Access members on Tuesday. We had some nice discussion about some of the stuff going on with it harmonically. But I made an offhand comment there about Rutter. So if you're not connected to the choral music world, you might not know who John Rutter is. If you are connected to the choral music world, you'd be like, how could anyone not know who John Rutter is? He's that kind of person. He's huge in that world, but maybe not as well known outside of it. And so He is a composer who is especially known for writing like Christmas Carol type arrangements, original music, but he's really written a lot of really beautiful things, and they're they're pleasant to listen to. I mean, for a modern composer who is, a seriously trained composer and all, he's not writing atonal experimental things. He's writing squarely within an accessible genre, which causes him and therefore his popularity to, maybe have a certain amount of, how would I put it, resentment among other composers and so forth. I don't share that. I think he's fantastic. And I mentioned specifically a piece called Pie Jesu from his Requiem that I think is perhaps um, I don't know. If I were to count on the fingers of one hand the five most beautiful pieces of music ever written, this would be one of them. And then I would have to think hard about what the other ones even should be. So I'm going to play it for you. It's not that long. I'm going to play it, talk about it a little bit. It's simple in ways that simple can be beautiful, but it's got a lot of complexity too. So I'm just going to play the, I don't know, kind of classic, a classic recording of it. And this one will, it's going to cause there then to be.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad will bond. This is the
Okay, so this is going to cause this then to get tagged by YouTube, and then there will be an ad placed on this video later so that John Rutter can get the royalties, about which I would be very happy if he got any royalties from this. So here is the piece. All right, there you have it. And apparently, John Rutter gets around. Two of you actually used to be neighbors of his. That's incredible. Okay, so I turned up the audio in the middle, actually towards the end, and I don't know if that made it better or worse for people. But yeah, unfortunately, the levels that I'm hearing are not the levels that you're hearing. I know that. So in any case, it's when I talk about that piece, well, being beautiful, okay, I think it is. That's just, a subjective statement. But there's a number of things that I can say about it that aren't very subjective. And so there is a version of it here on MuseScore.com. And I'm going to go ahead and post a link to it. In fact, I'll post a link to it. There's the sheet music. And here's the video. So the thing, if we actually look at the sheet music here, and this is apparently someone entered it from the choral sheet music with a piano reduction of the orchestra part. And it's, often, it's performed often, but seldom with a full orchestra, because who's got a full orchestra at their disposal? So it gets played with just piano or, organ or some other accompaniment pretty often. If you look at these first few pages here, it's mostly diatonic at the beginning, right? Let's hear MuseScore's version, which is nowhere near as impressive. Actually, I'll start with it. Voice comes in. Right, this is simplicity. That's just 1 chords, 4 chords, and 5 chords, like super simple diatonic stuff. Even when it brings in this B natural here, it's just a simple little tonicization of the C chord that's happening. It's all very simple harmonically, kind of most of the way through, really. There's a couple places where it gets, oh, what's going on here, right? Now it's doing more complicated things in here harmonically. Still nothing like, ridiculous, but this is now, the sort of level of sophistication that maybe one would normally write to harmonically. It took a lot of, guts or whatever to write something that simple at the beginning and really sustain that mood for a long way. And now you see that he's got all these flats going on here because it's kind of modulated here. But by the end, it's this super, super simple thing again in the key of F. So let's just hear the end here and looking at the score. Now, if I had only heard that MuseScore playback, I would have said, oh, that's pleasant, that's pretty, but it wouldn't have blown me away. I wouldn't have gone back and listened to it. I wouldn't have gone on and, come dug it out years later to show people, because I've heard this song for many years. It's the fact that it's possible to write simply in a way that then, when performed, can become amazing. That's what, to me, is the brilliance here. It's figuring out how to write simply in a way that can be really beautiful when actually performed. And it's control of so many details. I mean, this little motif, right, that motif recurs throughout the piece in different versions. There's a place originally where it goes in this little phrase here, it's expanded, right? Instead of a perfect fifth, now it's jumpier. Now it's moving by octaves instead of a fifth. And then there's this counter melody. dum, that's the secondary melody. That's basically the only two melodies in the piece, ish, right? It's built on those two motifs. And then the way he lays them together there and then has this simple look at the melody here. This is a scale. This is fa sol la ti do and then re mi just to make sure it gets you. Right? So fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi. It's just walking up the scale, but you give it to someone who's got that sort of pure voice to sing, and it's just breathtaking, right? So this is something that's, I don't know, worth striving for, worth seeing how one can try to reproduce some aspect of that. Write music that is got simplicity. Now, when I say it's simple, yes, it's harmonically simple, melodically simple, but how many people can nail that high A there, right? I mean, you could have some opera singer belt it, but that's not the idea there. It's supposed to be this like really pure voice, which is why it's so often done by children's choirs, right? So that that voice can be like a young boy or girl soprano who just has that A, just pure and simple. So writing music that's pure and simple and beautiful is a worthy cause, worth pursuing, and I guess that is my bottom line here. So yeah, and I don't know exactly how to hit on that, how to know that. I think it has a lot to do with knowing the instruments, knowing the voice, knowing the human voice, knowing the instruments you're writing for, to know how you can write something that will come off that way in performance. Now, writing on for piano, yeah, you can sound it out on piano or guitar, whatever instrument you might individually play. You can work that kind of stuff out. But if you're writing for an ensemble, you're going to have to know the ensemble, know the type of things. And yes, it's he definitely is paying tribute to Fauré. Now, the Fauré's Pie Jesu is not that similar to this, but it's got some elements to it, right, that are similar. And lots of people have written requiems, of course. It's paying tribute to lots of different requiems, but Fauré is definitely his main go-to, and there's an interview where he talks about it, and a couple of them actually. So, in any case, that's something that I has been on my mind ever since it came up the other day, and thought it was worth sharing. So, what I want to do now is switch gears and talk now about Sam's string trio. So, Sam Halberstad has written this string trio. And I know when I go to play it, I've now turned up my volume and it might be too loud. So we'll find out. You all have to tell me if it is. I'll monitor the comments, and if so, I'm going to turn it down. But let's hope that maybe this actually works okay. Yeah, beautiful job, Sam. Beautiful job. Now, okay, so there's a few things that Sam had said about this piece in his notes about it, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But I kind of wanted to play it first. Sometimes I find it useful to know something about what I'm going to hear before I hear it, and sometimes I don't, right? Sometimes I'd rather just listen to it first and then read about it. And of course, I've already read some stuff about this. But there's any number of things that one can talk about with a piece like this. But the first thing that I'm going to observe, I see some comments here, and one in particular talking about three people having a conversation. Well, yeah, so this is a good example of a type of counterpoint that is typical in the classical era, right? I mean, we often think of the word counterpoint as being, oh, well, that's something you did in the Renaissance, or that's something Bach did, but it's not relevant to Beethoven or not relevant to Stravinsky or whoever else. But no, that's just patently false. This is that whole conversation aspect, the fact that there's places where, we have the moving part. Well, this, okay, that's just a conversation, just a back and forth. But the fact that there's places like this, the melody moves, then while the melody has long notes, the viola has the moving notes, right? So when the melody's got the moving notes, the accompaniment is relatively static. When the melody is relatively static, the accompaniment has the moving notes, so that we have a relatively steady sense of pulse without any one person having to say, I'm your rhythm section, right? No one is sitting there going dum ding 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 and just beating out a rhythm, other than the places where that does happen, right? Once you get to this passage here, now the cello does have that beating out the pulse sense. So there are certain places where he uses that. Now, one of the things that I would have observed about this is just in terms of the balancing of things, the proportion of how often, of how much of the piece it spends in that sort of contrapuntal texture versus how much of the time the piece is in this type of texture. I personally might have wanted to stay in that texture longer, the more rhythmic texture. Why? Only because it feels Beethoven-y. And so here's where we get into the knowing anything about the piece, that it was deliberately trying to emulate something about Beethoven. And I mean, I think it clearly does. I mean, everything about this piece, especially once you get past, well, actually all of it, this is all very Beethoven-esque. Everything about the melody, everything about the arrangement of it, and all feels very Beethoven-ish. So you could listen to any given measure of this, any given four measures of it, and you would think, oh yeah, that probably came from a Beethoven string quartet or string trio or something. So it's definitely in that vibe. But one of the things that Beethoven would typically do, and I had made this comment, is have maybe more dramatic contrast within the piece. And so the contrasts that are happening here are the places where it does go into, right, that repeating rhythm. And it's just that it doesn't necessarily sustain that for very long. Then it goes back into this more conversational, right, this more conversational back and forth kind of contrapuntal type of texture. And the other thing that was useful to know about this piece is that he specifically wrote it to be playable by amateur musicians. In other words, the comments that I made about the simplicity in the John Rutter piece kind of applies here. He's going deliberately for a certain simplicity. Now, he's allowing there to be, harmonic complexity as needed, but harmonic complexity within the realm of how Beethoven might have written when writing simply. So it's not Beethoven at his most complex harmonically. It's Beethoven at his, writing simply. And I think Sam has captured that feel very, very well. And so in part, I think that might be Sam, you could speak to this a little more, perhaps. If you're deliberately saying, you know what, I really don't want to give them too many eighth notes because I'm worried that they won't be able to navigate the eighth notes, because you're doing a lot with quarter notes here, right? You're accomplishing a lot with very little demand on, right? Those are some of the only eighth notes in the piece are in a couple of those passages there. It's mostly based on quarter notes. Now, what I will say is, how would I put this? There's stuff that you might think is easy to play, and then there's stuff that is actually easy to play, or similarly with what's hard and what's not hard. And I don't have the insight into strings to say some of the things that I might want to say with any authority. But what I will tell you is this: my suspicion is that this piece is a little harder than you think it is for two reasons. One is simply maintaining the concentration over its length. I mean, it's not a long piece. It's what, 4 minutes long or something like that, I think. Yes, 4 minutes long. It's 4 minutes long, but it's like a lot of measures, right? It's moving along at a pretty healthy clip. So 200 something measures only takes 400 minutes, only 4 minutes, sorry. But it requires a certain concentration and, realistically, intonation. Being able to play these kinds of harmonies in tune because of the way the harmonic language, the key areas kind of shift, the use of the accidentals. It's very much in the keeping of Beethoven's harmonic language, but I suspect it's harder to play in tune than you think it is. That is my concern. And then I would think that the people who would be able to pull that off maybe would be okay with more eighth notes, some slightly more technical challenges. I don't know. So in any case, those are some of the things that I would be thinking about in a piece like this, is how to balance those elements. Because again, moment to moment, it's fabulous. There's like no, I guess I'll give you a couple specific notes, but I think it's really well done moment to moment. My only question would be about the big picture construction of it. So, and I saw you have some comments about that, and I do want to address those. So if I talk about my initial comments about what I heard, let me play from the beginning and make an observation. So what I hear is a single melody, down an octave, right? It's the same melody twice. I often feel that this way of breaking up, when you have that sort of call and response, and you basically finish one sentence before starting the next, that can work. But try this. I'm going to just extend that first sentence. Or maybe an E, so that it really blends more. Maybe that quarter note is distractingly short. Anyhow, you get the picture of what I'm doing? And then the same thing here. In other words, don't have a line finish before the bar line and then the next line start. I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm saying there's often value in creating these overlaps. And this is one of those things where, again, the difference between how the computer playback sounds and how humans sound can make a difference. Because what does it sound like when the human actually releases that note? What will it sound like with the human release of that note if you put it on the end of the measure versus if you extend it into the next measure? So right off the bat, I had that concern that call and response felt a little like the no one got to finish their sentence. Feels like I went to the store to buy a carton of, and then the next guy repeats, right? I want to hear eggs. So at least that was something that I was aware of here. Now, elsewhere, you're not doing that. Elsewhere, you are, finishing sentences in ways that would have made sense to me. So, and maybe that was a conscious choice there. It's certainly a valid choice, but it's something to call attention to anyhow. I'm going to look at some of the other comments now that you would put down about it. One of them was that you started with measure 41. You started with that melody at 41 and then added the cello, then added the viola, then took that and made an introduction out of it. So let's go straight to measure 41. This was then basically the start of the piece. So the comments that I made about the opening, I made before I ever heard measure 41 or before I ever saw your comments that measure 41 is actually the melody. But when I put it all in that context, it definitely makes me wonder then about that C. If I had let that E be a C, because that is what the melody is eventually going to be, right? If you do that, you're not robbing your melody. I mean, you're not taking anything away from your melody. You're using what's eventually your melody, but you're at least letting those thoughts finish. But there is something to be said for that fragmented approach. If you want that fragmented approach, another thing to consider, I'm just going to fake this here, is I'm just going to add a beat to this measure. I'm going to go to measure properties and make it be a 4/4 measure. I'm not saying this is literally a good idea, but check this out. In other words, letting there be some breath between the statements could also be an effective way of doing that sort of fragmentation. So yeah, I'm not saying that that's an improvement. I'm not saying any of the things I'm doing are improvements, but I am saying there are things that I would be thinking about. So I want to listen to just the main theme at 41. So that's our main theme, right? And let me think. I keep making this observation that a lot of this music is reminding me of Ennio Morricone. There's been several pieces that I've heard lately that have made me think that, but this is another one of them. It reminds me of his writing for strings. But yeah, that's a beautiful little melody. And then the little, right, the tonicization of the A minor chord here, and the use of the secondary dominants. It's all beautiful stuff in the vernacular, and then a little more chromatic feeling. It's just lovely, right? It's lovely. So that is the main melody, and if I look at it as really being that 7 bars, is that like? So it's 2 phrases of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. I don't know how I got 7, and that's why I was doubting myself. It's 8 bars, like I expect. And the next phrase is definitely also 8 bars. So there's like these 2 8-bar phrases that form the basis of the piece. And then we get more into that fragmentation, right? So the same observation could occur here that, maybe you take some approach to how you want to connect those fragments. But here's where, you could use it differently. Like whatever you choose to do to approach your fragmentation at the beginning of the piece, approach it differently once you get here, because now you've already stated the melody, and now we have reason to expect something a little different. By the way, you wrote this double stop with 2 voices. I don't think I would do that. I think I would do that just with a single voice chord there. I noticed you did that other double stop, so I'm not sure why you did that unless you were originally thinking the rhythms might differ. But I don't think there's a reason. I don't think there's a need for it. Let's put it that way. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I just think that the stuff that's going on here is just really lovely. But I would look at then this melody, and think about that as my basic 8-bar melody, and then the next 8-bar melody, which obviously relates to it. It's not like it's two separate themes. It's just an A and a B within a single theme. And then you're starting to do some of that fragmentation again, and then you get to maybe a new little bit of something here with this. So that's maybe the conclusion of big A as far as like a main theme. It has a A theme, a B theme within it, or A1, A2, however you want to look at it. Then we get now some new material, but it's not totally new, right? It's based on what happened here. What's new about it is the rhythmic underpinning. We get to reuse the bum ba da 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 dum. So at this point, we have now heard most of the thematic material that we are going to hear for the piece. So even though it's not literally exactly in sonata form, I don't think I haven't done a complete analysis to figure that out. I feel like by the time we reach that point, it's as if we've completed an exposition. Sam, definitely feel free to correct me in any of the things that I'm saying. But my sense is it's not literally sonata form, but it's ish, right? Because there was our A theme, and then here's our B theme. And then the B theme ends pretty much about where those repeating cello notes stop. Here. Now there's a little coda or something at the end of that exposition, if we want to call it. And so this feels like the start of what I would call a development, if we were to, sort of pigeonhole this as a sonata form. Now, I will say it's interesting that you've chosen to end that exposition-y section with an A, because the piece is more... It's really in C, right? There's aspects of it that are A minor, and certainly the this section is in A major. So like the fact that you've managed to go from C major to A major, that's actually a Beethoven-esque thing, I should mention, with the modulation. We talk about related keys for modulation, and C major to A minor would be related. C major to A major is not related because it's going from no sharps to 3 sharps. However, it's indirectly related in a way that Beethoven loves to play with. If we think of C major to A minor as related, fine, but then A minor and A major are also related because they're parallel major and minor. And so Beethoven would do that, go to a key that wasn't directly related but was indirectly related because it's the relative major of the parallel minor, or the something like that, where there's that sort of double relationship going on. So that feels Beethoven-esque to me. So this feels development-y. I want to come back and address something of Joanne's comment about the time signature. I would not, in fact, do what I just said about adding that extra beat. I was just looking for a quick way to add some separation. Maybe more to the point would be to add a whole measure. Let's see. So that the time doesn't get interrupted. It's still 3 beats. And then maybe if we added the C, maybe we'd like it more. I don't know. No, I don't like it any better. I'm just playing with ways of adding space. The extra beat would be a way of doing it, but it does not feel stylistically appropriate at all. If you start playing with those time signature changes right off the beginning, you're going to lose. You're going to fail to establish this clear sense of three that the piece really is totally based on. So I really wouldn't do that extra beat. I did it just for demonstration purposes. Now, overall, there's nothing wrong with time signature changes within a piece. I just don't feel it's appropriately stylistically in what's going on here. So I see that Sam was saying that he wasn't specifically thinking about sonata form, but as I've mentioned, it's really such a pervasive form in Western culture, whether it's a sonata, whether it's a symphony, or whether it's the jazz thing of we play the head, then we solo, and then we play the head. It's really, I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to play with that thing, and then I'm going to restate the thing somehow at the end, is so pervasive in our musical thinking that even if we don't deliberately go there, there's a pretty good chance we're going to go there anyhow. So to me, I feel like you've had an exposition, and now we have development material. Aha! Now this is that same kind of fragmentation that I was just talking about, right? Where you did actually finish this and then fragment it. So this is development by use of that fragmentation, and it works great. And I love this back and forth. All right, I have to ask myself something. This reminded me of something, and I don't remember if it's something that I wrote or not. So give me a second. All right, so the reason I'm pausing here is A, I'm reading Joanne's comment here about important to be 8 measures. It's not important, it's just common. Most of our melodies naturally come out that way in this type of style. It'd be sort of unusual to come out with a melody that was not a multiple, a power of 2, basically. We expect, 2-measure motifs, 4-measure phrases, 8-measure phrases that combine into 16-measure phrases. Powers of 2 are how most music in this type of style is going to naturally be put together. In fact, not to put too fine a point on it, but I don't even know what that expression means. But to some extent, that's what the word classical means. When we talk about the classical era, as opposed to the Baroque era or anything else, Baroque music is not typified by exact 4-measure phrases. Everything's a little more amorphous than that. They're small phrases that are all glued together in sort of weird combinations. But by the time you hit Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven, we're dealing a lot with very specifically 8-bar phrases come to a cadence, 8-bar phrase come to a cadence, much more regularly than Bach would do. Bach would do that writing simple pieces, but not like in a fugue or something like that. So 8-bar phases are definitely sort of primary to how we feel things. So you can certainly go against that, but it would be unusual to do that in this style and have it feel natural. It would tend to feel unnatural if you had a 7 or a 9 or 11-bar phrase. It happens in real life. It just doesn't happen that much in this type of music. Okay, so the thing that I'm just hearing some other piece of music here. Someone tell me what I just sang. It's something. It's also Beethoven. Or it's Mozart. I can't remember which. Anyhow, so really nice stuff in here, and then all the back and forth, the conversation is really nice. This part here is a little more modern sounding to me. That descending chromatic line. I'm not saying Beethoven wouldn't have written it, but it starts to feel more like we're getting into, whatever, Scott Joplin, George Gershwin. We're getting into a slightly more jazzier type of language in the use of the chromaticism there. Yeah, that's a subjective determination, but that's how I heard it. It sounded a little out of place. Sixth Symphony, maybe. It could be. I don't know. I don't. Could be. yeah, I don't actually know Mendelssohn's Sixth Symphony, so and that piece is surprisingly, like I could, my mental sense of, yeah, my mental sense of how that piece goes is very clear, yet I don't know that symphony. So it's, but if that's what it is, that's what it is. I'll have to go check it out. All right. So, um, so yeah, well, I'm visually looking at the score because it tells me a lot of things about how it's arranged and put together. Because like what happens is I can, without even listening to it, I say, okay, here's that conversational stuff. It's development of that motif, that idea, and it goes on for a bit here. Then we get to develop this, right? Now this isn't just development; it's pretty literal. This is the part that I think there was feedback that it was a little too repetitious. And I think maybe you eliminated some of the repetition. If so, if that's the spot, then good. Because, yeah, more than that would have been too much. So that's really pretty literally this. Right? So it's that section again moved over to F. So for me, if you're thinking of this as a sonata with development, then this would feel like, oh, well, this is something that you should play around with more, not have it be so literally the same. If, on the other hand, we're saying, hey, we're in the recapitulation, we're in the home stretch, we're restating that original melody, then I'd say your piece is almost done. And yet it goes on for quite a while longer. So that's what made me aware that, oh, well, this isn't really in sonata form because I'm hearing something that feels like a recapitulation, but then it's not because there's a lot more stuff. Or if it is a recapitulation, now we get another development. And then we get our another recapitulation here, right? This is a recapitulation of the A theme. And so the recapitulation of the B kind of came before the A. That's a little, unusual as sonata form goes. But again, if that's not your goal, that's not your goal. And so what happens then is we get that recapitulation in there. And then again, I feel like there's an opportunity for the piece to be over. Anywhere in here, because now it's developing more. And we hear that theme again with its fragmentation. So what I feel is happening is there's material that was used before that's being reused again here, but perhaps with not enough variation to it to sustain the interest that I would want it to sustain. I think the sonata form makes a good model. I would pack the middle with as much of that variation. I'm not saying a piece this long couldn't work. I'd say the order of things could possibly be improved if the development sections had more of the meat to it. In other words, if this is more of a rondo form where we're going to keep bringing back that A theme, great. But then I want more contrast. A B, A C, A D. I want those other sections to have more contrast, not be just more developments of the original theme. So I feel as far as sustaining interest through the piece, there's probably more things that could be done to sustain interest in a piece this long, or to simply shorten the piece. And I think that would also make it more playable by amateur musicians, again, from just the concentration aspect of things. Uh, Realistically, people are going to play things better to the extent that they can basically memorize it. And this ends up being a little too long for people to memorize. Not that they literally want to memorize it, but most people eventually, by the time they get to a piece performance worthy, it's turned into mostly muscle memory, but this ends up being a little long for that. I want to play just a section of this because Sam, you also mentioned that I asked if you had a particular Beethoven piece that you were referencing, and you said no, but you did mention at least um, the beginning of Beethoven String Quartet number 1. So I have that pulled up here, and I just want to play a little bit of it. Okay, so is that the part you mean, or is there maybe a part further in? Because it's not sounding that reminiscent. Ah, that melody is, though. That melody does actually remind me of your melody, so maybe that's what you mean. But now I'm seeing Dean, Graham, no, someone, Trevor. Trevor, you nailed it. That's it. It is exactly Beethoven Pathetique Movement 2. How could I forget? It's like probably the single, the single piece of classical music I know the best. Bum boo bum boo bum 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 that is absolutely the part I'm thinking of. Thank you, Trevor. Now I can sleep. So good job. So yeah, so there's obviously Beethoven's writing he's got his thing going on. There's bum ba da 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 dum bum ba da 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 dum. That is your little bit of this little melody here, right? So yeah, I can see some similarities there. They're similarities that when you point them out, I can absolutely see them, or maybe you see some other ones too, and maybe that wasn't even the one, maybe that was more subconscious. But yeah, there's things, but vibe overall structure wise, it's not so much, right? This is, if I think of this as being largely based on it's in 3/4, the melody is based on dotted halves and quarters and counterpoint between them. That's how I would have characterized your piece. I look at the Beethoven, I see, well, it is in 3/4, but I don't see that melody based on dotted halves and quarters, and I don't see that level of counterpoint between them. What I do see is much more textural variety, right? We have unison passages, then we have single melody over chord, right? Homophony would be the term. Yeah, that's that melody. I totally get it. Then we have this texture, right? The violins or the inner voices giving us the pulse, right? And then there's some counterpoint between the top and the bottom, between the first violin and the cello. So he's got that going on. Then he returns to a more homorhythmic texture. So he's got all these textural changes, right? So this is what I mean when I talked about the dramatic contrasts. These are the kind of things that Beethoven is doing. He's not sitting on one texture all that long. I mean, he does when the mood strikes him, but even then, he wouldn't sustain it for, I think, as long as you do. You basically have, the texture, that's that one of the contrapuntal dotted halves and quarter texture, and then you have the one with the bum ba da 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 dum texture, right? Those are the two main textures you're playing with. Beethoven's got probably more textures. Here's homophonic 16th notes, and then here's some homophonic eighth notes, but then some counterpoint between them, right? So, and that only goes on for like 16 bars before he's back to this texture. And he's varying textures up a lot. And then what do we get over here? We're less than 100 measures in. Now, something totally different. You haven't heard this yet, right? So, yeah, Beethoven's all about big dramatic contrasts and bringing in new material. Daringly, not just sitting on his laurels. When he writes a long piece, it's because he's really willing to develop things quite a lot, including bringing in new material. And so I would leave yourself open to that. That would be another way to sustain interest on this piece. Just say, you know what, I'm going to bring in some entirely new thematic material at some point. As if, like, again, rondo forms do that. They bring in new thematic material, like that Beethoven sonata movement that I was just talking about. That was the C theme. It's A, B, A, C, A. And we don't hear that C theme until we're like more than halfway through the piece, roughly speaking. Okay. So, oh yeah. That the connection was just like It was like a 4-note motif. You can't write 4 notes that someone hasn't written before. There was just something about those 4 notes that reminded me of that, and I'm very happy to know what they are. But no, you can't write 4 notes that aren't reminiscent of something else. In fact, okay, I got to do this. I have to take a total detour here and go back to the Pie Jesu for 1 second. Pie Jesu was written. I have it on MuseScore.com. Pie Jesu was written in the early 2000s, maybe the 90s. Someone could probably look that up and let me know for sure. Oh, does it say that there? No. Okay. But I'm pretty sure it was after the piece I'm about to play for you. All right. Remember that theme? Now, bear with me. Check this out. Check this out. Check it out. Got to pay some more royalties for this, but it'll be worth it.
So then I said to him, you ought to customize your car insurance with Liberty Mutual. So you only pay
I don't want that damn ad.
for what you need.
Here we go. Listen. So, in just that snippet, you can't hear it, but hear it in the context of the movie. I'm telling you, John Rutter ripped off that scene in Christmas Story. Just saying. It is just a similarity in the theme, similarity in the orchestration, similarity in the tempo, the overall feel of it. It's just a vague similarity because you can't put 4 notes together that someone hasn't put together before, is the bottom line there. Okay, so so Sam, I think I've addressed the things that I wanted to address. If you have any last questions for me, I'm happy to talk about those. Meanwhile, though, I'm going to play one super brief piece while I wait to see if you've got any last other questions here. This is a piece posted by, I got to get so I know you use different names, different accounts, and I think you posted this as Louis McGee, I believe, but I could be totally wrong, and if so, I'm sorry. But anyhow, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to play the piece. It's a cool little piece. And that's it. So the story is that he's not a composer, like he's not someone who has written a lot of music before, and he's trying his hand at writing some things and has studied a little bit of theory and is trying some things out here. And to me, it sounds wonderful. And Dave made the point that it sounds a little like Bartók, and I actually absolutely agree with that. It does sound a little like Bartók in that there's aspects about it that feel somewhat tonal-ish, but pushing the boundaries. Like there's triad types of sounds, but then polytonal kinds of sounds, like multiple chords being heard together and rhythms, cross rhythms against each other and things. So there's a lot of things about this that remind me of Bartók that are kind of cool. But the thing that, and so I think it sounds great. And if someone had written this and said, yeah, I've been studying Bartók and I'm going for it, I've said, yeah, I think you did a good job of this. And then we could talk about the aspects in which it was or wasn't like that, or in the same ways that I've been talking with Sam's relationship to Beethoven. However, knowing that that's not where this came from, that this was more just a stream of consciousness thing, the challenge is going to be the same as when I looked at one of your pieces before, and I talked about whether you were really hearing that melody or whether it just came out because you plucked some notes in the MuseScore. And that's what made me bring out my little plastic keyboard before. I'm going to challenge the same thing again here, that the next piece you write, sing it first. Record yourself singing it. Then notate it. And I want to see if you end up writing similarly or if it causes you to write differently. And then the question will be, which one is more you? The stuff that comes out when you throw things into MuseScore and then delete the ones you don't like and keep the ones you do like, which is one way of doing things. It's also a way that abstract painting is sometimes done. We allow some accidents to happen and we get rid of the ones we don't like, right? Whereas a representational painting is much more like, oh, I know exactly what I'm trying to do here. I'm not saying that you can't do that with abstract painting, but there are a lot of legitimate abstract techniques that are based on trying accidents, basically trying out different accidents and seeing which ones you like, making it being an editing job rather than a start from a completed notion of what you're going for. But I want to challenge you to create one that is more, I have a fully formed idea in my head. I want to be able to sing that idea, then notate it. And so that would be my challenge to you, to try to do that and see what that music comes out like. So meanwhile, I'm going to check Sam's comment about contrast. Yeah, so contrast by texture is, I think, the main thing, because I think you're already doing a good job of developing your melodic material. There's a sense in which there's repetition. If you find 8 measures that are identical to 8 other measures or virtually identical, you should ask yourself, do you need that? You do if you're trying to state a rondo form. You do if you're having a recapitulation. Other than that, you might think, am I really trying to develop the idea? If so, there should be more difference. But I think, personally, it's the textural thing that'll make the bigger difference. You've got your 2 textures. You've got your ba-do-da-da-dum texture, and you have your bum-ba-da-da-da-dum, bum-ba-da-da-da-dum, texture. Those are the 2 textures that you're playing with here. I think if you had a 3rd texture to bring in there, that would already be a big help. Yeah, I mean, you have little moments of like the unaccompanied violin line, but I mean a 3rd texture that you really use as a structural unit. I think that's the thing that might help to bring things together. So that said, I'm going to wrap things up. So I need to remember that actually I'm going to leave. If you guys were happy with the volume, I think I'm going to leave this here. I'm just going to pull this volume down that much more so that I can talk over it more than I usually do. Don't know if this is too loud. Don't know if you can hear me, but you know who I am, right? I'm Marc Sabatella. This has been the Music Masterclass. So please come join us. Send your friends over. Submit more music. I love having music to talk about here. Just post it to the community. So join the community if you haven't already. And again, hopefully you can hear me because, again, I've been playing with the mix. And in fact, let me just pull this down that much more. So, and also check out, I pinned to the top my website. Check out all the courses. I've been talking about counterpoint. I've been talking about harmony, using a lot of terminology. All that stuff is explained in my courses. Highly recommend you check them out, as well as the MuseScore course, of course, to get better at using MuseScore itself. So, hope you all had a good time here. I know I did, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. All right.